Do you tend to lean forward when you squat? Do you have depth issues when you squat? Has anyone ever told you that you need more ankle mobility in order to reach depth? Or that in order to combat leaning forward, you need to keep your chest up, your chest forward, or stand tall? Well, what if I told you that you don't need any more ankle mobility than you already have, and those cues are ruining your squat? What's going on, everybody? If you're new here, my name is Joel, and thank you so much for tuning into this video. So before I go on to the main topic of this, I want to make sure that I do my due diligence so I don't add to the dogmatism that is already kind of prevalent in the fitness industry as it is. No cues are inherently bad. There are only cues that are used in the wrong or poor context. The ones that we discussed before in that intro, such as keeping your chest up or staying tall, very well could have practical application in a training setting, whether that be when somebody's squatting or if they're doing like a row or something like that. Sometimes people can hunch over a little bit too much and we need them to extend the spine a little bit more, and sometimes those cues will just click for people. But in the context of this video, I'm going to go over why those cues are bad for people who need to stop fighting their forward lean when they squat, and because that could be stealing some output from their squat and leading to some depth issues. So now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about it. Okay, so now that we've discussed that those cues can actually be useful in the right context, let's start this video off by discussing who these cues are not going to serve. And generally speaking, this is going to be the person that has longer femurs and a medium to long torso. Reason being is because if you keep your chest up, you're actually fighting a natural torso lean that is your body attempting to keep that bar centered over your midfoot. So real quick, what do I mean by you're fighting a natural torso lean? So naturally, if you don't have any weight in your hands, your center of gravity is going to be your head. So if I were to gently let my body weight rock forward, I can feel my calves starting to tense up because they're co-contracting with all the weight on my toes. I can feel my hamstrings starting to light up, my spinal erectors just a little bit, because all the muscles on the back of my body are fighting me from falling forward onto my face. And same thing happens if I go to the other side. If I rock back onto my heels, now I can kind of feel my quadriceps, I can feel my abs a little bit, because all these muscles are trying to keep me from falling backwards. So this actually changes when you add a loaded barbell onto your back. So if I'm high bar squatting or if I'm low bar squatting, that bar is now going to be my new center of gravity. So if you are going to be fighting this new center of gravity, which is going to be a loaded barbell, let's say in a low bar squat, by keeping your chest up, it's going to do three things. From a biomechanical standpoint, it's going to limit how much you can reach depth. From a musculoskeletal standpoint, it's going to limit how much strength you can actually express in your squat. And third, from a stability and a skill acquisition standpoint, it's actually going to make things look a little bit wonkier because you're going to be fighting so much for that midfoot. All right, everybody. So from a biomechanics standpoint, this could actually be why you're limiting your ankle dorsiflexion or your ankle mobility and why you're not hitting depth in the squat. So if we bias this positional cue of staying tall with the weight on our back, it could create this scissor effect of the upper and lower body. And what do I mean by this scissor effect? I mean an upper back that is hyperextended or very arched with a rib cage that's externally rotated and really pushed upwards, and a hip complex that is going to be relatively tilted forward. So what this does is it actually leads to a chain of events down to your lower body that's going to actually limit how much range of motion you have at the ankles, because you're going to be shifting your body weight a bit more towards your toes. You're also going to be biasing external rotation or outward rotation of the upper leg bones or the femurs, and that shifts your body weight onto the outside part of your feet a little bit. We actually need a little bit of internal rotation and a little bit of pronation or supination or inward turning of the feet in order to express our full ankle mobility capabilities. Secondly, coming from a muscle standpoint, our muscles contract the most forcefully at a mid-range length, not from a fully lengthened position or a fully shortened position. So if you can imagine this, if you have like a 60-pound dumbbell and you're trying to curl it, if you had your arm completely extended, it's going to be really hard to curl that 60-pound dumbbell. Unless you're really, really strong, you're probably not going to curl it at all. But if you come up to a 90-degree angle, now you have a fighting chance, and that's because your bicep is now at a more mid-lengthened position and can contract with much more force. So now that we know that a muscle contracts much more forcefully from a mid-range, let's extrapolate that into this posture of keeping the chest up in your squat. So if I have a really arched back like this, my hips are tilted forward, my chest is up, what this is going to do is it's going to cause a lot of different muscles to be either pre-lengthened or pre-shortened. And we know now that that's not going to really help because they're not going to produce as much force. So let's single out two muscles really quick just so we have an idea. So if I get back in this position, my glutes are going to be pre-lengthened, and as you can imagine, the glutes are going to play a really big role in extending the hips in the squat. And it's going to pre-shorten my adductor complex because the adductors connect to the pelvis and alongside the inner part of your femurs. So if I'm tilting my hips forward, they're already pre-shortened. And not a lot of people know this, but the adductors actually play a huge role in extending the hips in a squat. Because when we're out like this in a squat, it's going to be contracting, pulling the femurs underneath your pelvis again, which is going to be extending the hips. And you could pretty much just take that to any of the other muscles. I have a lengthened core. I have a pre-shortened lower back muscles. It's just not going to be very advantageous at all. And thirdly, we're going to be going to look at this from more of like a subjective stability and quality of movement standpoint that could lead to some problems with skill acquisition in the squat. So if we have all these issues with keeping our body centered with that barbell over our midfoot, it's going to make the squat look really wonky. So if I'm trying to keep my chest up and I'm coming down into the depths of the squat, you might see somebody's hips really start to tuck under them so that it could rotate around the femurs, and what this might be perceived as is like really bad like butt wink. Or you might see somebody rocking back and forth onto their toes and onto their heels during the squat, making it look very unstable. So if we start off from the beginning with a proper position of the upper and lower body, and we're letting our torso lean forward with our squat, it's going to look much better subjectively, probably feel better subjectively for the athlete, and it's going to lead into better skill acquisition because it makes it more repeatable. Now we've gone over 3 different reasons why you shouldn't keep your chest up in the squat for this particular person. So now let's go over a few ways we can actually help this person squat a little bit prettier and feel stronger in it. The first way is going to be a bit generalized as well the rest of them, but it's going to be starting the squat off right with a proper brace and proper positioning. The second one is going to be implementing a few cues that might help the concepts click for you a little bit easier. And thirdly, we'll include some variations that could help you learn and solidify these new movement patterns over training cycles without having to think about them too much. And just to preface this all, it's okay if it takes you a little bit longer to really chew on these and start using them in your training. And you might not even use some of the stuff that you hear in this video. So you might hear a cue from somebody else that works way better. And some people are just going to get it super quick. Just don't get frustrated. It's going to take a while. It's a process. Now, for the sake of not turning this entire video into a squat setup video, I'm going to keep this very generalized. So if we're starting with a very arched position, this is going to dictate how we start the movement. So if we know our starting position is going to be indicative of how the movement is going to go, we want to keep a little bit less of an extension posture. So instead of having your chest pointed straight up, keep it down just a little bit. Keep nice and tight with your upper back and pushing down with this barbell. Sometimes it helps a little bit if you cue an exhale to bring the ribs down a little bit, but you want to make sure that you're keeping your head up and you're trying to imagine like your sternum being pulled up towards the ceiling without letting your rib cage follow it, because this is going to create good extension in the upper back without overdoing it. And the lower body, you want to make sure you're not letting your hips dump forward completely, but a little bit underneath you. So you could see the difference between a very exaggerated extension posture and a little bit less of it. This is what we're going for right here. So in terms of a couple of cues that could be useful for teaching these new things, I think it's always great for most people to start with leading with the knees. So instead of leading with the hips, and this kind of already biases myself into that old position we're trying to fight off, leading with the knees kind of helps me keep centered a bit more onto my midfoot. So I always cue, or mostly cue people to break at the knees first rather than breaking at the hips and the knees at the same time. Secondly, and this is one I got from Sean Collins, is letting the clavicle chase your knees. So if you could think about this, as the knees are going forward, my clavicle is going to be coming forward with it at a natural pace. Nothing too exaggerated so I don't end up like completely having my torso become parallel with the ground, but just as my knees come forward, my clavicle is coming forward just a tad bit too. And then thirdly, guys, we'll go over some different variations that could help you solidify these new changes over a training cycle or over a few training cycles. Now, it's pretty self-explanatory, but you probably don't want to introduce any of these new changes during like a meet prep per se. You want to keep these with a little bit a lower intensity, either for your back down sets or on your secondary or tertiary squat days, so that you can focus a little bit more on making sure the movement quality is good rather than pushing as hard as you can to move the most weight possible. We can save that for a later time in a different context. So the first one is going to be pause squats. So pause squats kind of force you to maintain the position at the bottom, and that's going to be great because it's a lot of the times it helps people keep a little bit more stability in their upper body because they know they can't just rebound out of the hole and dump all the tightness. Secondly is going to be tempo squats, maybe like a 2 to 3 second tempo, much for the same reasons. Third, you can go for like every minute on the minute squats, so really low weight or moderate to low weight very frequently over a training session, so that you just have a lot of exposure to this new change again and again and again to help it solidify. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap up the video. Thank you so much for sitting through the whole thing. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, or you can find me on Instagram at Joel_Meyer. You can ask me on there as well. I respond pretty frequently. And if you like the video, please like it. And if you want to see some more, go ahead and subscribe because I'll be sure to keep on coming out with more stuff like this real soon. Take care.